Welcome to this morning's session on Southeast Asia, a compelling case for investment. My name is Cecilia Mazeka. I am the Executive Director for Forbes in Asia. I'm normally based in Singapore. It is great to be here in beautiful Los Angeles. As many of you know, Southeast Asia is one of the world's fastest growing economic regions and perhaps one of the least well understood. China remains the Goliath of emerging markets, as does India, but increasingly investors and multinationals are paying more attention to the 10 dynamic economies that make up ASEAN, which is an acronym for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. ASEAN is 50 years old as a grouping, and it groups together the 10 nations, which is Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand. The region as a whole for the last 2 decades has experienced tremendous economic growth. Millions have been lifted out of extreme poverty. Increasingly, there is a growing middle class with newfound spending power. The question for us today is how best to invest in this dynamic region. What are the opportunities, the risks that one should be aware of, and how to manage, and sort out the best strategies to reap the benefits and the rewards, and how to address some of the pitfalls. We have a very diverse group of panelists today, bringing together with them perspectives from policy and government, business, and investing as well. So let me introduce them to you. Over here on my far left is Kirk Wager, the U.S. Ambassador to Singapore. Next to him is Cesar Purisima, the Secretary of Finance of the Philippines. Kasim Sid Patamsak, the President and CEO of Merchant Partners Securities and also Merchant Partners Asset Management in Thailand. Richard Lee is the Chairman of Pacific Century Group based in Hong Kong. And also Dina Jalal, the former Deputy Foreign Minister of Indonesia. So what I'm going to do is to first ask a question to all the panelists. And I'd like to start with this question, which is, when you talk to investors and when you yourself look at this region, how important is it to not look at it as one monolithic market, because it's often referred to as a region, but that it's more of a collection of individual unique markets at different stages of development? Ambassador, I'd like to start with you.
Well, thank you, Cecilia. I appreciate it, and I always enjoy being at Milken. As I said to someone, if you don't have interesting conversations here, you're not trying. So I feel lucky to be here. You know, I look at ASEAN as really, I think it's one of the most dynamic places, not just for today, but for the next 30 years. And it is because of not just the demographics, which are better than most other places in the world, certainly better than China right now, but also this push together for integration. And it's, you know, you've got India on one side, China on the other, and so there is a gravitational force that says they have to work together on certain things that doesn't exist in Latin America, that doesn't exist in Africa. And because of that, you can do a lot of things in different markets, I think, in an easier way. From the platform of Singapore. We have 3,600 American businesses based in Singapore. They almost all have regional, some have global. But I tell American businesses who only think of China when they think of Asia, someone asked, last year we were on a panel here with Paul Wolfowitz, and they asked the question, what do they need in ASEAN? And his answer was everything. And so I don't care what it is that you do, you might want to stick your toe in the water and try Vietnam and Thailand, and if it's successful, reinvest. And there's an ease to that doesn't exist in a much larger or more complicated market like a China or an India. So it's a little safer. And I also think the other difference is when I was here last year, I was stunned by everyone talking Africa, Africa, Africa. And Africa is my area of study. I'm a big fan of it. But I said to some of the investors, why Africa? They said, well, there's no competition. So that's true, but there's also no suppliers, no distributors, and no partners. And in Southeast Asia, you have people that you can work with that know the regional markets, distributors and people from America or the West that have invested there, learn the tough lessons, learn the good lessons, so you're not reinventing the wheel. So I think that based on the trajectory into the middle class, I don't care what you do, whether it's insurance or candy bars, there's a market for you, and from that platform you can expand out even further into China and India from Southeast Asia.
Dino?
Thank you. Well, first I've been here 2 days, and I hear a lot about the emotional, divisive debate about the future of this country. I want to say that for ASEAN, we're very resolute that we are for Manny Pacquiao. For the, okay.
Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
So and it's all it's for pragmatic reasons, Caesar, because then the GDP of Philippines would grow stronger, and ASEAN would also benefit from it. Yeah. In any case,
Don't make me have to argue for Floyd Mayweather, please.
Let's stay on topic.
Yes. All right. Well, first thing that is most important to recognize is that ASEAN will be different than the European Union in the sense that the boundaries of the European Union will keep moving. Yeah. But in ASEAN, there's consensus that ASEAN will stay as it is. Southeast Asia, 10 countries, right? And within that, yes, there is each country, each economies have its own uniqueness, but we are becoming a community. By January 1st, 2016, the ASEAN community will formally come into place. It will be a single market, single production base. It will be a competitive region, and it will be plugged into the global economy. So I think that is going to be one of the most important developments for Southeast Asia. That is ASEAN becoming a coherent geopolitical and geo-economic unit. And it's going to be full of potential. It's currently the 7th largest economy in the world. It will be about the 5th largest by 2015. It will have about 125 million consuming class. The growth is high by any standards. Indonesia is growing about 5%. I think Philippines 6% or above. Cambodia about 8%. Laos 7%, and Myanmar 7.6%. So really high growth across the board, and that translates into immense opportunities for any U.S. companies that intend to invest there. But just one last point, there is a survey done recently asking about 600 U.S. businessmen what do they think about investing in ASEAN. Overwhelmingly, they said they intend to expand their business, expand their workforce, and increase their profits. And they see Southeast Asia as a diversification strategy, part of the diversification strategy to their investment in China. And overall, they all feel optimistic about the future of their investments in Southeast Asia. So potential is quite good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dino. Secretary Caesar, I take it you're a Manny fan, but we're not here to talk about boxing per se, but it makes me think of how the Philippines as an economy has been regarded as one in ASEAN that often punches above its weight. Can you talk to us a little bit about the prospects for the Philippines and its role in the ASEAN community?
Thank you, Cecilia. Before I talk to that, let me put the discussion in context. Yes, ASEAN countries individually are different. And in fact, some of the largest and some of the smallest, some of the richest and some of the poorest. And that's exactly the reason why they got together. And the vision is to be the hub of intra-Asia trade between Japan, between China, and India to the south, Australia, and New Zealand. And that's slowly coming into place with trade agreements in place, as well as logistical and connectivity arrangements set up. ASEAN, if you look at it, has the potential. It's the 3rd largest population in the world if it's one country. Dino said it's the 7th largest country. In terms of resources, it has the third largest reserves, foreign exchange reserves in the world. It has some of the largest natural resources in various categories. For example, the bulk of the supply of abaca, palm oil, tin, coconut, etc., comes from the region. But more than that, ASEAN has proven its potential. It integrated, for example, the electronics industry, and now it's the world's largest exporter of electronics, accounting for about 28% of the world's supply. More importantly, and people talk about economies as if they're an abstract concept, but it's really about people. And when you look at the people of ASEAN, they're young, about the same age as India. And it's expected that by 2030, two-thirds of the world's middle class will be in Asia. And of that, approximately 20% will be in ASEAN. And these are the consuming sectors. These are the ones that's going to drive the world economy. And that's why I think investors should look at ASEAN, not because there are 10 individual countries, but because it's in the right location, right at the center of Asia, young population, it has the scale, it has the potential. And therefore, I think if you want to take advantage of the Asian century, then ASEAN would be a good entry point.
I'll come back to you in a little bit to speak more about the Philippines. Cass,
Yes.
How should people look at ASEAN from your perspective?
Well, I'm very excited. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this very astute panel here, and thank you for being part of this program. I'm excited about the outlook of the whole region. It's going to change. The whole landscape will change in the next 5 to 10 years easily. The connectivity that is happening. When Kirk said we needed everything, we really needed everything. I mean, the exploding Indo-China country in the region, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, they're still in need of a lot of even basic services that we think we don't know. Connectivity-wise, China will be reviving the old Silk Route, as we heard so much about, from China all the way through Europe, through the old Silk Route railway and highways. And from China all the way down to Singapore, we'll be building through a new railroad and highways, connecting all of ASEAN. Or technically, you can take a car and drive from Singapore to Paris, after the whole system is completed. And just look at this whole system that are being built out. They're just all these cities along the way that are being built out, all this urbanization, all these towns that would need power, electricity, water, centers. I mean, there's just so much potential that it's just unthinkable for us. We're just trying to stimulate the kind of the growth potential for all these cities that are coming up. Thailand happens to sit in the middle of ASEAN, being connected by land link from Singapore all the way up to China, and we are connected both sides. Internally, Thailand, we are building the two main roads, artery, to connect this side of the ocean, the South China Sea, to the other side of the Indian Ocean. Just from connecting that two things, we will be changing the whole logistic landscape of that region. We are sort of the lifestyle icon for the new emerging countries in the region, and the people, the Burmese, the Myanmar, and Cambodia, and Vietnam, they watch our soap. They watch, they follow what we dress, what we listen to our songs. I mean, these are all soft products and services that can be offered. Auto industries, electronics, basic things like cinema, movies, all the services, healthcare, education. These are all the potentials that are very up and coming for us. And we're very excited about that whole game.
Lots of opportunities. Richard, you are a global investor. You look at the world economy for interesting opportunities in different markets. How do you look at ASEAN?
Well, first of all, I am positive on it. The fact is, I put right now over 50% of our investment in terms of dollars and cents, as well as the time and the management dedicated to it. Over half of it is in Southeast Asia. Wow. So I think we vote with our feet on it. But and the very exciting markets such as Philippines, with now I would say a revived culture of strong administration and good governance. Some of these markets, which were overlooked, has now become very exciting, and I think the Philippines is definitely a case in point of that. We have presence in Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, and they're all growing very, very strong. But I would like to offer a counterpoint, which I think some of the people here in the audience are market participants in Southeast Asia. is that I think one also have to be cautious in that, one, if you're acquiring asset in Southeast Asia, they're not cheap. And they're especially not cheap if you compare that with Europe today. And when I say investment, it can be, purchasing an asset, buying an operation, or simply paying for sales channels. So they are quite priced in, and you better have your eyes wide open because we have had a very good 7-8 years of growth uninterrupted. So the price right now is also pricing in that it is 7 to 8 years of uninterrupted high single-digit growth. So you have to make a judgment on that. I think that's one. Two is that it is full of competition. You have competition from the locals. You have competition from the regionals, and you have competition from the global market. And I think the ambassador said it right. It's very different from Africa in that it is wide open, but it's wide open for a reason. And in Asia, you have a lot of competition, and things are not exactly cheap also because there's a reason for it. So, the fact that Asia is growing very strong and it's an amazing market is not exactly a secret. That's, part of the problem. So I think we all have to have our eyes wide open.
Okay, I want to follow up on that before moving on to another question. So M&A, it's expensive in Asia. It sounds like that's beyond your expectations.
Very expensive.
Okay, and is it justified? I mean, do you feel like there's a correction coming because it's getting a little frothy?
I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And so if it's too expensive to buy, and in your country it is probably the most expensive right now, for a reason, for a very good reason, for a very good reason, because people have made a lot of money in the past 10 years on it. Then if you say the value is not there to buy, then you build. And then it comes with execution risk, it comes with local partner risk, it comes with all of those above. But again, there's no free lunch, so it is a very attractive region, and you better be ready for it before you step in, so you got to be prepared for it.
Cecilia, may I just respond to that?
Well,
Probably this room, because it's mostly self-selected, understands the opportunities in Southeast Asia. I think that folks on this panel would be surprised how little is known about it in the rest of the United States. So part of my job has been to go around to New England, Chicago, throughout Florida, Houston, to talk about the opportunities in Southeast Asia. And sadly, a lot of folks here, when they think of Asia, they only think of China. And so I have found that Southeast Asia has been an untold story, even to this day. And I still think from an American point of view, the opportunities that exist are not well known. And while I think it is priced in, there's still some good value there. The one other thing I would say that is, I think, fundamentally different from the other two major emerging markets of Latin America and Africa is the connectivity. One of the things that I was shocked about is 2% of tweets every day come from the city of Jakarta. Not Indonesia, the city of Jakarta, 2% of tweets. So Southeast Asia, people have jumped over laptops and are very connected on their phones, which means ease of business, and the opportunities there are very, very different. And I think that is a crucial point that doesn't get enough talk of here. But I just wanted to raise the point that you would be shocked how little people know.
Cecilia, I agree with Victor that the prices may seem... with Richard, sorry. I'm thinking of your older brother. that prices may be a little bit on the high side. But when you look at it from the potential, no? When you look at it, say, from the average per capita of the region at $4,000, no? Then you see that the upside is still quite high. Secondly, I think the world's starting to notice ASEAN, because when you look at 2013 and 2014 FDIs of ASEAN, it's greater than that of China for 2 straight years. No? So I think that's something important to note. Third, technology is starting to make a difference. No? The ambassador mentioned tweets. ASEAN is the second largest Facebook community next to the US. No? So not only is becoming more socially active from a technology standpoint, but technology is becoming an enabler in the way business is being done, in the way education is being done. And I think being a late mover, this gives the region an opportunity to leapfrog some of the more advanced countries and catch up in terms of skills. And I think these are very important points. Young, with the opportunity to leapfrog and catch up in terms of skills, and really have increased purchasing power down the road.
I think one point that also is important to note is there's now a new religion in Southeast Asia, which is called entrepreneurship. I've never seen anything like it. I think every city you go to in Indonesia, this spirit is very much alive. Universities, local governments, on TVs, the icons, these are all now entrepreneurs. I think this is the same across Southeast Asia, and I think this is definitely an important game changer, and I think it's changing the face of business in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia. And I say this because in the past, we had entrepreneurs, but the wrong kind of entrepreneurs, because they were so connected to what was called KKN, corruption, collusion, and nepotism. You can't get rich unless you know somebody in power, right? But now it's totally the other way around. Meritocracy, entrepreneurship is the new code of the region now. I think the new generation is defined by that new code. It's a good thing.
Richard, so I want to go back to that, what you mentioned earlier. How do investors avoid overpaying?
No, but I think I need to also self-correct a little bit on that. Within ASEAN, there are countries with various degrees of development, prosperity, and more importantly, prices. So, for example, Thailand is everybody who invested during the crisis would find themselves in having tremendous return, and so was Indonesia. There are other countries which has not at the strong V curve and still have a lot of potential to come. It may be Philippines. In fact, Philippines things are not that expensive. Asset prices is not that expensive compared to other ASEAN countries, compared to China, compared to India. So it is in some way it is like Europe. In some way it is not, but there is some commonality, but there are differences. So there are some values that if you dig in deep enough, you'll see it.
I want to come back to where you see value later on in the conversation. Do you agree with what the panelists have said so far about pricing and all the upside potential, but some of the risks?
Well, we look at a lot of deals all the times, and I think yes and no. I mean, there are still a lot of pockets of values where you can be had. Perhaps maybe because Richard went in with the name Richard Lee that drives up the prices, and along with the whole market, and doesn't help anyone either. But I think there are still a lot of hidden gems. There are a lot of when you go in as an institution, or maybe go in as a corporate looking for the big trophy assets. There are not that many with that huge sizes, and then everyone is all going after the same thing and bidding up the prices. But there are a lot of pockets of smaller value, smaller assets that has the potential to grow, but people just don't. It's not that obvious. So you have to have the local intel, be it in Indonesia or Philippines, and a lot in the Indochina area. Just from what I said earlier, there are a lot of growth potentials in so many sectors, but you need to go in and find it. I think the challenge is really to find the local partners that you can work with. And once you find them, the next challenge will be trying to find the talents of in this individual markets to try and carry that promise through. But I think there's still just a lot of different things that can be put together in that area.
Can I ask you to be more specific for the audience who are interested in looking for those hidden gems, say in Thailand?
Well, just if we can pull up the first slide. That's the only thing that I prepared. Number 2, if we have the slides. That's probably the 1 or 2 slides. But you can see that's the map of the GMS, which is the Greater Mekong Subregion. There's a lot of acronym that you'll be hearing over the next few years from that whole region, whether it's TPP, East Asia, ASEAN, and the new trade pact that are being negotiated is the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which will entail ASEAN plus another 6 countries. That will include Australia, New Zealand, China, India, Japan, South Korea. It's going to be even bigger. But you can see the infrastructure that are going to be built out over the next few years. China is building from north all the way down through all the way to Singapore, and we're building the 2 main arteries, left and right. Just the kind of urbanization, the cities that will be popping up along the way, along all of these routes, are phenomenal. I mean, just look at the CP Group in Thailand is one of the premier agro group, is building centers in this area already. I think we have a Thai friends from the Central Group, which is also in the departmental store group. They are building smaller malls to cater to these areas. Just from the mall itself, there are a lot of other services. With the explosion of the auto sectors, you have the auto services, you have the car dealerships, I mean, and all the side industries of almost every sector that you can imagine. Mobile phones. I mean, you can think about all the different services that will come along with the mobile services. The education that is tied to the mobility of the mobile phone. I mean, just that map alone it gets me very excited. I don't know if I have to spell out a few more other sectors, but healthcare, for example, just healthcare alone is a huge industry. Just look at all the sides countries. When they become affluent, they would have to go somewhere to visit a hospital, to see a doctor, to get educated, to seek all sorts of services. I mean, it's not even there. It's not even there today. I mean, it's just the best way to do it is probably to buy tickets and get to that area, and you understand the vitality of the region. It's 65% of the population is under 35 years old. It's a huge potential there. And everyone will be learning very quickly on the new Internet of Things.
Not to lose sight of the historical importance, yeah. I want to point out that if you look at that map there, I mean, this is areas where they used to have wars and genocide and conflict and bloodshed, Vietnam War, what happened in Cambodia. Almost every country in Southeast Asia had conflictual relations or war with the neighbors. And what you see now, 10 ASEAN countries coming into one in peace, the borders are coming down and so on. When I look at things, what happens in Middle East, and I look, I feel that there's hope, a lot of hope, because I see what happens in my own region and what you see there, neighbors who used to be sworn enemies have now become members of the ASEAN family. So I think the historical importance need to be appreciated.
Well, I think what Dino says is that is the thing. If you haven't looked at the region or spent any time there, I think that's the fascinating thing, that all governments seem to understand that widespread economic prosperity leads to stability in a way that I haven't seen in any other region across the region. So it seems like even and there are varying degrees of competence in governments out there. But regardless, it's to placate and keep people kind of off their backs, all boats rise. And it's fascinating. Even Thailand went through a coup. They went from projected 7% growth to 4% growth, still in the black. And I live in Miami, and I've stared at South America for 25 years. And they have a bad crop, people are arguing in the street, and the country shuts down. In Southeast Asia, there seems to be this common ethos that working all together makes all boats rise and keeps the stability, and it's fascinating.
Just to add to that, I mean, we are hearing not so good news coming out from China, and maybe it's a slowdown, but they're still growing at 7%. I think it's relatively healthy. But just to think about the Chinese population itself that will be flowing through to Thailand, into Southeast Asia, into the whole region that will benefit. I just pulled out from the Wall Street Journal this morning, today's edition, 10 major industries with huge potentials. Today's paper that I just pulled out from China, and the 10 sectors. All of this relate to all of ASEAN. And this would only support the case. This is for China alone, but all of this will spill over into ASEAN. Yeah. So,
I do want to do the service of helping investors understand the potential risks, however. One of which is the political risk factor that you talked about, even though the AEC is something that's been widely touted as having the potential to bring economic integration together, it does have its share of hurdles for that to happen. And for companies to actually operate throughout the region in a more seamless way, that also poses real challenges. For one, you talked about the positive factors of Thailand, but we do hear a great deal about the political change in government, and the military government, it's still in charge in Thailand. How do you address that issue?
well, you have to understand countries in Asia, especially for Thailand, in my case, we have been through so many of these political crises. In fact, we've been through a major financial crisis in 98, 99. And you have to appreciate that the countries that have gone through a crisis learn the lessons, especially for corporates, for business sector in our country. And we have learned to also detach a lot from the governmental regime. And we have been, the business sector has been very, very robust. They've been looking outside, they've been trying to improve themselves and trying to increase efficiencies and trying to detach from the government policy. It would help so much more if the government is more supportive or is there to help us. But with the absence of the government, and we had a very chronic political problem in the last 10 years, we literally have maybe one PM a year, one prime minister a year. So we are one of those, we use a lot of prime ministers. We change them a lot. So, but it doesn't really bother the business sector. You look at the stock exchange, it's still all-time high. Last year, we had a coup. And I think the stock our exchange is hit another new high last year. So you can see the detachment, the dealing between the governmental administration and the business sector in that country.
Well, living in Hong Kong,
no, go ahead.
Pardon me. Living in Hong Kong, you certainly see a great deal of politics at play. I mean, Cass is saying that political risk is not necessarily something that bothers investors. As an investor such as yourself, is that true from your point of view?
Well, technically, I would not say Hong Kong is part of the ASEAN growth. I just wish that Hong Kong had that kind of growth rate. It is more of a...
Between Hong Kong and China, there's lots of friction when it comes to politics.
Yeah, there is a lot of friction when it comes to politics, but at the end of the day, in terms of the amount of disruption, it really did not have much disruption in actual sales. There was in one area called Wong Kok, yes, there was 3 weeks worth of sales drop in one geographic area, which is probably 5 square mile, something of that sort. But there is nothing that is major. I think the minister would have a few points that he wants to.
Please.
No. Go ahead, please.
No, I thought that, again, I just want to offer a counter view. I said it already, I vote with my own action plan, half of our businesses in Southeast Asia today. But, obviously there is tremendous growth and the room of providing goods and services. I think 2-3 weeks ago, you would see on Financial Times on the weekend there was a bubble graph that by 2025, Asia is by far the largest middle-class spending power in any region in the world. And I also like to echo what the minister said earlier about ASEAN. Generally, countries are moving away from corruption, moving away from bad governance, and nepotism. But at the same time, these things go through the right way, but it's a process. And in different markets, you see a various degree of it. At the same time, it's also the ugly truth that your biggest enemy may not be that MNC providing the same goods and services, or the local provider of that goods and services in the market, because the market is wide open. Your biggest enemy may be in your boardroom, so maybe he's stealing your lunch. So, and so these are a lot of the pragmatic issues that still exist against the backdrop of very sustainable growth that we can see for now.
Secretary.
Several points back. First, what are the risks in ASEAN? I think the challenge is to make each country feel like a winner in integration. And this is going to be the continuing challenge, because ASEAN, unlike Europe, doesn't have a Germany that can fund the integration, for example, in terms of investments in infrastructure. And this is where the role of the private sector come into play. I think it's advantageous for the private sector to have a more integrated ASEAN, but it has to be judicious in its investment decisions to make sure that it's not unduly concentrated in one, but more or less spread in a manner that makes everyone feel that it makes sense to be together. Secondly, in terms of political risk, there are risks across the board, but I think now in the age of the internet, access to information, people now are more empowered. And I think the ability of autocrats to control countries are now less. And as people are able to align their interests in terms of their own as opposed to how they're governed, no? It would be harder and harder for autocrats to control and bottle them up. Plus the fact that travel now is practically universal and borders are blurring. No? And that's why, despite the challenge, I'm really bullish that this is all happening at the right time for ASEAN. And therefore, I think it's, for us in the government, it's important for us to take advantage of the opportunity so that we can really accelerate investment in infrastructure, which is crucial. Because for ASEAN to be one, we have to be connected. For people to be able to talk to each other, to connect to each other, for investors to be able to move their goods, we have to be connected. And that amount of money is substantial. That's a major opportunity in ASEAN, about 1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. And if we do that, I think we can really unleash the opportunity. You were talking about healthcare earlier. ASEAN is the world's largest medical tourism market. Thailand is number one, Singapore is number two, Malaysia is among the top, Philippines is in the tail end. So just when you talk about tourism, ASEAN as a whole has more tourists than France. No? Of course, we have the largest market just north of us, which is China. And that's why, in India, no? That's why from an infrastructure, tourism, agribusiness, consumer, asset management, the opportunities are there. And that's why I think it's incumbent upon government and private sector to work together.
Can I take up? Sorry.
If I may, I think that there are ways to minimize the risk, though.
Yeah.
And so it would probably shock people to know that U.S. FDI into Singapore is double U.S. FDI into China. 5 times what it is into India. So we, as a country, the U.S. has invested more in ASEAN than the next 3 countries combined. 204 billion, 155 billion of that comes through Singapore. And the reason for that is it's a great platform. It doesn't stay there. The capital goes to work in the region. But a lot of the business deals that you'll see, whether it be in Myanmar, Cambodia, are domiciled in Singapore. And so that's where your accountability is, that's where your legal recourse is, and it unlocks investment to the region. So there are ways to minimize your risk in a very smart way that you still have the access to some of these more volatile emerging markets, but you have the safety and security of the platform. And I often say that the capital of business for Latin America is Miami, the capital of business for Africa is Dubai. The difference is In Southeast Asia, you're right there, and you're an hour flight from pretty much everywhere where your investment is. And they now have, they've certainly have this, the international arbitration panels that have been there for some time. Singapore is developing a commercial court where they will bring in judges and lawyers from the actual countries, so you're not really offending the sovereignty of the legal system, but you're not also exposing yourself to, for example, a Burmese court. You're dealing with a Burmese judge in Singapore with a European or American and Singaporean judge. So there are ways to do this that I don't think exist in other emerging markets.
Well, talking about the risk, I think one thing I want to add is there is one risk that is also happening not just in ASEAN, in Southeast Asia, but throughout Asia, which is the rise of nationalism. You know, I know you don't have that problem in the United States, but you know, there's nothing wrong with nationalism. But if it's the wrong kind of nationalism, then it becomes a problem. Yeah, it becomes inward-looking, or it becomes you know, arrogant or ultra-nationalistic. Then it will lead to the wrong path. But so long as we can keep it positive nationalism and outward-looking, and connect well with the sense of regionalism, then I'm quite optimistic. There's still a dose of narrow nationalism, including in Indonesia and some parts of Southeast Asian countries, but it's still within an acceptable dose. You know, not an alarming dose. But I think this is the risk that we need to watch for, and we need to keep the sense of nationalism and regionalism go together.
I do want you to address that. Whose phone is that? Is that yours? Or? Okay.
Go ahead.
That's okay. Oh, well, I did want to ask you, while you're doing that, about Indonesia per se. What's an acceptable dose of nationalism? And, you know, it sounds really ambiguous. And, you know, I think investors need clarity as much as possible. Aside from that, I do want to ask you to give the audience something specific in terms of the opportunities that are in Indonesia at this moment, especially with Jokowi in charge, the president, and also what are the specific risks that has to do with this economy, which is the largest in ASEAN.
Well, President Jokowi has made a good transition, yeah, and has come up with big plans for Indonesia. He aims for the next 3 years 7% growth, adding 35,000 megawatts of electricity, 1 million homes per year, 300% expansion of exports. Right? So very ambitious targets, and the focus will be on infrastructure. I think building some kind of 40 ports throughout Indonesia. So a lot of opportunities, and a significant portion of that will be met by foreign capital. And this is going to be quite a business-friendly government. Right? And on top of that, what we see now is Indonesia rising not just in the capital city, but throughout Indonesia in the cities. You know, this metropolitan revolution is very real in Indonesia. We see the emergence of middle class throughout many cities in Indonesia, and the emergence of talented local leaders. So the opportunity is there to grab. Yeah.
What's the potential downside?
I think what I said earlier, there's something called excessive populism and localism. You know, those are not exactly the same things. But if there's too much of that, it can cost us. Yeah. But so far, so good.
Go ahead.
Just, we're going to say that the integration road is not paved with roses. There's still a lot to be done, but because of the will to integrate, makes, you know, a lot of obstacles becomes easier, and we have the intention to do this. You know, we are very diverse, as Richard pointed out earlier. The whole 10 ASEAN members, one spectrum. We have all sorts of regime here. We have military regime. We have communists. Vietnam is still a communist. We have democratic. We have Islamic democratic countries. But and the sophistication of the stages of development is very diverse. You know, one side Singapore, and the other end is Myanmar. They don't even have electricity all day. You know, so I mean, just the whole harmonization of the framework, the rules, the laws, the standards, are going to be a challenge. And I think everybody pointed that out. Everybody is aware of that and is working towards trying to harmonize all of the standards. With the ASEAN economic community coming in force by 1st of January next year, all tariffs will come down. If any, there will be up to all tariffs, up to the maximum of 5%, and free movement of labor, free movement of capital, goods. I mean, it's just there are more opportunities than downside. The downsides will never go away. There will always be hurdles, obstacles that has to be worked out along the way as we integrate even more.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'd like to open the floor and invite the audience to ask our panelists any questions that are on your mind with regards to anything that's been brought up. One of the other issues is, of course, you know, we hear a lot about the big markets, a huge population, great for consumption and labor workforce. Productivity, though, is an issue in terms of developing human capital and developing workforce skills for global companies and multinationals. Kirk, to what extent is that an issue that you hear about from businesses that you talk to?
You really hit the nail on the head. That is you know, I think that there has to be a commitment by the individual countries to really look at productivity, because that is, the demographics are fantastic, and we've alluded to it, but you know, 65% of ASEAN's under 35, 50% is under 25. You got places like Cambodia where 52% of their country is under 16. So that's either a really good thing or a really bad thing, frankly. But these are the commitments that government has to play a role, and frankly, their international partners have to play a role to help with finding ways to educate and, you know, give these idle hands something to do. But I think the Secretary's point is right on the mark. Is people, I think, overlook the connectivity as it relates to education, and you know, I went to Apple last year when I was at this conference, and you know, we all have iTunes, but I've never looked at iTunes University before. There's something like 10,000 college classes available there, like how to build a website from Stanford for free. And our embassies are trying to use that a little bit more and getting that content out, because it's free, first off, which is good in our budget world that we live in. But that accessibility is something that I think that we can use together to build up productivity. But there's a lot of work to do on that.
Cecilia, 60% of the gains of ASEAN since 1990, the growth of ASEAN since 1990 is based on productivity. But nevertheless, I think the challenge for us is to continue to invest in our people. In the case of the Philippines, we're now among the top outsourcing nations of the world. And what we do is work closely with the industry players to make sure that we're able to provide the skills that they need. In fact, we have a partnership where the industry players actually push their training into our schools, so that instead of training them when they join the company, they share it with the whole educational system, so that instead of just training the ones they hire, they train all the graduates. And this is the kind of partnership that I think the countries will have to do to make sure that we're able to provide the workforce that's necessary for us to continue to fund this growth. Some of the nations of ASEAN are already facing this strain. For example, Thailand is practically at zero unemployment. Right. It has to import people from other regions. Malaysia is like that, Singapore is like that. But the good thing is there's Indonesia and the Philippines, the two biggest countries in the region. So the challenge for these two countries is really invest in our people. So education is a major investment for the Philippine government. We've tripled our investment the past 4 years, and we will continue to increase that. Healthcare, making sure that they become productive and healthy participants in the future is also going to be crucial. And investment in technology, I think that's very important.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give the opportunity to our participants. You raised your hand first, sir. Can you introduce yourself? And
Hi. Hi, my name is AJ Gandhi. I'm a partner at QS Capital, which is an Africa-based fund. The thing about capital is that it's completely or almost completely fungible. So by your own admission, ASEAN is a difficult place to do business from a cost perspective. Two questions, or a two-part question. What are you all doing to be able to enable folks from the US and Europe to actually invest more actively? And which are the areas that compete for the same investments versus ASEAN?
is there anybody in particular you want to address that question?
No,
or-
it's for the panel.
Who would like to address that?
Well, in the case of the region, I think right now we're benefiting from the change in strategy of most multinationals from China +1 to China +2 and 3. No? So because of the geopolitical situation that's going on in the region, there's more diversification that's going on. And we positioned ASEAN as especially Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines to some extent. We're starting to get some of those +2s and +3. No? Secondly, the big challenge for us is to create an ASEAN class of financial instruments because our financial markets are not yet integrated. And if we succeed in doing so, and we're trying to do so, we're now on our 7th package of financial integration program, then investors from abroad doesn't have to invest in individual countries, but in one ASEAN class of instrument. That hasn't happened yet, but that has to happen. Third, if we are really to become one market, I think we have to achieve a common customs border. Right now, our tariffs are almost zero between each other, but we have different tariffs to the world, which creates a risk. No? Especially, for example, when TPP is signed, there are 4 ASEAN countries that are part of it, and the 6 others are not part of it. And that's going to be some of the things that we have to navigate. So I don't know whether I answered your question, but I think from the Philippine standpoint, that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I don't want anyone to leave this room because the premise of your question I don't agree with it. That you said that it's very expensive, and this is one of those. In my opinion, you get what you pay for. Frankly, there's 525 million people in the middle class today in Asia. By 2030, that's projected to be 3.2 billion. So, where you want to be. ASEAN has 620 million people. It's 100 million more people than live in Europe, and the demographics are fabulous. But so you're going to pay for that, right? I mean, as Richard said, it's not a complete secret. So I don't want anyone to leave this panel to say, it's too expensive. No, there's value there. You have to do the work. I agree with Kaz. If Richard's company is in there, you might want to look somewhere else because that's jacking up the price. But I think the Secretary is right. The biggest problem that I see from where I sit, I mean, TPP, yes, there's 4 ASEAN countries there, but I think it's going to raise the standards of everyone, particularly on intellectual property. I mean, Thailand, Indonesia, they are going to have to protect intellectual property because you're going to see investment flow to Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and it's already in Singapore. So if you're going to have, and the Philippines are going to have to raise their game if they want to see a pharmaceutical company coming in there and doing a plant. So there's a benefit to the rest of the region of TPP that I think is just just going to follow investment. But my biggest worry right now is the non-tariff trade barriers that are popping up. Indonesia, for example, has a new law that says every smartphone there has to have 40% Indonesian content. Well, they don't actually make it, so they might as well say that every phone has to have a free unicorn, right? So, but we're working through it. The Microsoft is based in Singapore for the region. They have the conversation, but there are things like that just the nationalism pops up that sounds great, like we want to develop our own industry, and then you go there and go, but again, how are you planning to do that? So that's where the U.S. government has played a role, and business plays a huge role. So those are the things those are the challenges we have to get over.
What was the question there?
It's a variant of. My name is Carl Harris from Everstone Capital. Actually, my question is a variant of the comment you just made, which is one of the things we struggle with in this region is the transaction complexity and costs of just getting stuff done. To give an example from Indonesia, just the foreign content restrictions, and therefore what you have to do in terms of legal structures and legal costs to get around that. And some investors are willing to do it, some investors are not, so it kind of creates this risk overhang where you sort of say, well, we'll do it, but will someone else do it afterwards? And I just wondered where you see that going. It seems to have got worse, actually, in the last year, not better.
Well, I think that, as someone who comes from politics, the one thing that I try and tell everyone is that patience for a new administration, whether it be President Obama, President Xi, Modi, or Jokowi, is something that people aren't willing to give. And I think that, I fundamentally look at Jokowi and see his entire life's trajectory change through entrepreneurship and exporting, frankly. But that doesn't mean the entire government is there yet. So a lot of folks that are investing out of Singapore have more of a wait-and-see attitude to Indonesia because they're just getting their footing, frankly. And I think they have to show some leg. They have to say, if it's going to be business friendly, we got to see proof is in the pudding, as we would say in the States. So I don't think we're there yet in Indonesia, but I don't think that you would say the complexity in the other 9 ASEAN countries has gotten more. I think it's Indonesia because, it's the biggest country. It's got its own gravitational pull. And when I'm speaking, like when I was speaking in Chicago, where they have this huge history with China and really have never even thought of anything else, I worry if they get past the gravitational pull of China, they then get sucked in immediately to Indonesia. And your first landing spot in ASEAN probably shouldn't be Indonesia. That's probably something you have to have a local partner. You have to understand the market. Don't just chase the demographics or the size. You have to be smarter. So.
There's a question here.
Hi, Ben Rosen, Manning and Napier. So I believe the panelists made a point that investors have been willing to look through politics, but I have a few questions on that. The first one is, China's been way more assertive in the region and has been encroaching upon ASEAN's territorial integrity. And I just want to get a sense of what is the view of the panelists on how to manage that very complex relationship with China. That's the first question. The second question is, in Thailand, there's a big divide between the red shirts and the yellow shirts, and the only way we've been able to manage it has been through the military. So what is the way forward, especially if we're looking at getting the new king whenever that happens? And the third question is, there's a lot of new tension between Megawati and Jokowi, and they're supposed to be on the same side. So how do you see those issues playing out, and how does that impact Jokowi and his ability to get the reforms done?
They're great softballs. Good.
Was that last question to the Filipino minister?
Well, the first question
yeah.
first, maybe. First, I'm not the foreign minister, so this is not an official answer. But the good thing that's happening in the world today is that the relationship among countries has many dimensions. So, for example, in our case, between China and the Philippines, we have a trade dimension. In fact, the trade relationship with China is the fastest growing for us the past 10 years. No? We have a people-to-people relationship. We have a tourism relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And we have this issue in terms of territories. I think the key is not to make it front and center of our relationship, agree to disagree, and continue to work on the things that benefit you. Our position is that this should be settled based on international law. But obviously there will be different points of view. But the focus would be to make sure that we continue to develop the relationship that's beneficial to both. And there are many precedents to that. For example, Taiwan and China. They're still practically in a state of war, and yet their relationships continue to grow. There's now direct trade relationship with them. So they've just decided to put the disagreement on the side. And I think that's going to be the challenge, for the test for us to try and put that on the side.
Dino, did you want to?
Yeah, well, first on China. From Indonesia's viewpoint, I can say that as we look around the region and the next years to come, the game is China. China is going to be the next emerging superpower, the largest trading partners for all, if not most, of Southeast Asia. And I think figuring out what China is all about and how we engage China, I think is going to be the most important foreign policy for Indonesia. United States, we know all about it. It's a known quantity. We know the do's and the don'ts, right? China, we haven't figured that as much. So I think for us, the game is China, and getting to figure out China is going to be critical. On Megawati and Jokowi, obviously, I'm not trying to get in trouble by saying wrong things, but the most obvious thing is that we haven't been able to get the politics right at this point. It's still quite messy and complicated, but the good news is, I think I'm right on this, there has been a decoupling between our politics and economics, in the sense that politics is messy and noisy and so on, but there's an economist who said recently, no matter what happens, our economy growth will not go below 4%, just the way the structure of the economy is. So I'm quite hopeful. We need to get the politics right, improve the quality of our politics, but I'm quite sure that the economy will move on here.
Before we wrap up, because we're running out of time, I just wanted to, did you want to say something?
No, because there was a question.
All right.
You want me to say
Quickly,
something? Okay,
yeah.
quickly. Yeah, well, basically, I think for us, we don't really have an issue with China. In fact, we are working very closely with them, and the relationship has gotten even better. On the political side, I think the whole street that you see in the media is not really what is the case in Thailand. It's real power struggle between the old guards and the new guards. So that will play itself out over time. And I think people want to see prosperity more than the actual conflict between abstract subject on democracy and people's. The key is the business sector is thriving, is robust, and they are very adaptive. I think this is the key word, and that has been proven time and again for Thailand.
And I did want to ask Richard to give the parting word to investors that have to make the final decision on capital, regardless of all the pros and cons that we've heard today. What would be your advice?
Well, I think you have in this panel, very distinguished people with very distinguished knowledge, and they know intimately what this region is all about. I think to sum it up is, it is not cheap, but it's not cheap for a reason. It is tremendous good fundamental numbers for you to work with. The government is trending towards a much better trend in terms of governance and transparency. I think the fact of the technology, as the minister said, just kicks away the power of those who want to be aristocratic and dictatorial. And I think that is actually a very, very big factor leading towards more transparency and governance, and that's good for business. My parting caution is you have to look across the desk to see whether that partner has the same kind of value as you do, whether the interest is being aligned, and at the same time, you can also think about whether you do need a partner, or whether you can actually build a team there and do it in a step-by-step way, as the ambassador was saying. So,
thank you. I want to thank all the panelists today. Let's give them a hand.